Guys, look, it's part 2 of the Vice shit with Blair White. For those of you who are not around on the first part of the video, listen, here's our lineup, okay? Are you ready to be... Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay, so here we go. So on the far left over here, we've got Libcuck Andy, who doesn't think it's okay to call out racism if the discussion is between two black people. We have Blair White, the biggest fucking trans turncoat in the universe. We've got the Matrix Man, very cool. We've got Power Hair Lady, extremely cool. We've got the only principled conservative I've ever seen in my entire life right here. It's actually pretty astonishing. She hasn't talked that much. Over here on the far right, we have a true character. We have... Can I move to the lower right? Am I not in the lower right? Fuck me. Over here on the bottom... I'm getting bigger. Fuck you. I'm blowing up. Over here on the bottom right, we have the one, the only, the biggest fucking Uncle Tom for LGBT issues. This motherfucker came to a Vice discussion on LGBTQ issues and brought with him a printout of the article Donald Trump took out in the 1980s to have the Brooklyn Five, it's the Brooklyn Five, right, executed, to argue against the point that Donald Trump is racist. On a discussion on gay, lesbian, and trans issues, he brought a printout that was put out, Central Park 5, thank you. I always fuck that up in my head and I don't know why. A 40-year-old piece, fucking article, 35, whatever, that he could bring out to argue against the point. He highlighted it. That's what this guy did. He thought, I bet they're going to call Trump racist. Printed that out, highlighted some parts of it, held it up, and basically said, look, there's no N-word. When he took out the ad, he never said the N-word. This unironically happened live on Vice's studios and then here on this stream. And it was amazing. Then over here in the top right, we've got suburban gay Andy. This guy is cool. This guy right here is a huge cunt. He even looks like a cunt. The one over here in the MAGA hat, I don't remember much about him other than that. Also, look at his shirt. Come fuck with me about my MAGA hat. I'll make you famous. I assume that means, like, I'll kill you? Pretty keyboard warrior-y. And then over here, don't remember much about this guy. And then over here on the top left, we have the snowflakiest conservative lesbian Asian woman. Not a combo I've ever seen before, but...
One of the reasons I walked away from the Democratic Party and liberalism is I am so fed up with identity politics. I am so fed up with political correctness. I am so fed up with all of... And everyone here has already said it. It's lack of policy, all identity.
The left started adding too many letters to the LGBT acronym, so I supported a fascist. By the way, anytime somebody says that, I walked away because the political correctness went mad. They never walked away. They were never on the left. It never happened. At the most, they were politically ignorant and left by default, and then they watched like a YouTube video or two and shunted right. Chat isn't on screen? Fuck me. Why not?
Mayor Pete has been mentioned. Mayor Pete is gay. He's been on the cover of magazines with his husband. Does having somebody who's gay running right now, does that make you want to vote for him?
Mm-hmm. I think you should vote on policy. I get asked that question all the time. It's great to have a gay candidate. It'd be great to have a lesbian candidate or a trans candidate. I'm looking at the policy. Everything else is peripheral.
I could not care less. I mean, the fact that he is gay doesn't... I think there is such division in the LGBTQ or queer and trans...
I'm here for this. I don't give a fuck.
Between gay and trans and cis. That doesn't mean he has my back as a trans person. That doesn't mean that he will have trans-affirming policy and support those most marginalized in the trans community. It means nothing to me that he is a gay person because he is also cis and he is also white. And
Oh, wait. Fuck me. I thought she was going somewhere with that. It doesn't matter to me that he's a gay person because one's identity doesn't necessarily ensure they're going to be representative of that group's interest. No, it's actually because he's also cis and white. Fuck me. Goddamn fucking liberals. I was about to say... I forgot to change the title. I was about to say... that I'm on board with this because I'm not in favor of voting for a person based on their like identity. Obama didn't really end up improving shit much for black people, right? Didn't he? It's not as though a Hillary presidency would have ushered in a new era for women. In reality, the systems that perpetuate the problems like minority communities face are sort of agnostic to the identity of the people running those systems. Policy is what matters here.
And he's holding all of those identities and experiences at the same time. So I would love to see some firm policy proposals that include trans people and non-binary people. We haven't even talked about that yet, but I haven't seen that yet.
I don't know why I'm not more excited about him than I am. There's something missing.
I'm surprised
A good candidate, maybe.
that everybody is so anti-Pete. I mean, I know a lot of sort of Pete-curious conservatives who think he's...
Is that like bi-curious?
Yeah, I mean,
That is the most oppressed group in this country.
and one of the main reasons is that I think he's very progressive, but he's tonally moderate. And I think even just listening to us, I mean, everybody's so angry all the time. To have somebody who is somewhat aspirational and who is trying to make a pitch for something better and more, something more uniting. Like, why is that so terrible?
This is actually a rhetorical point that I'm divided on. Just in terms of the effectiveness of reaching an audience, I don't know whether outright anger, or like capitalizing on fear and populist, anxiety is more effective or less effective than being aspirational, building up hope for the future, talking about a vision of a brighter tomorrow. I don't actually know which is more effective because I feel like Bernie splits it pretty much down the line. Trump was 100% like dealing with the muck of the time and the reactionary populism, and Obama was pretty like future oriented. So I don't really know. It seems like both are valid approaches.
I think it's nice.
One of the reasons I walked away from the Democratic Party and liberalism is I am so fed up with identity politics.
Brandon Straka. What are you up to? Jesus Christ, 200k followers. Can we, for these fucking Vice segments, rather than bringing in like people who have media training, who are actual like political representatives of their side, can we bring in actual normal human beings? Or if we're going to bring in people with political representation, can we bring in me? I will happily go to one of these and dunk on every single fucking person there, especially the libtards. Campaign founder, liberal. Former liberal, gay. Okay, so he builds the identity around it. Former liberal, gay, conservative, outspoken, on a mission to hashtag red pill humanity. Is this the guy that actually started the hashtag? Campaign founder for Walk Away. So this guy, not only is this guy a grifter who says like, the PC left turned me into a fascist. This guy actually initiated the concept of organizing around pretending to once being a left-leaning person and then walking away and becoming right-leaning. God damn. Brandon debate with Sam Cedar. Shut up. Sam Cedar has labeled me a grifter. Good. Where the fuck is the... From 2018. Why doesn't it just show up? Fuck me. Whatever. Really, though, it sure would be nice if from the onset, like while they're doing these interviews, rather than just like, oh, hey, this is a Republican, you could be like, this is like a co-funded founder of like a grifter, you know, of the walkaway pro. Like, these are not normal people, but they kind of paint them as them the way they're presented here. It's very frustrating.
I am so fed up with political correctness. I am so fed up with all of, and everyone here has already said it, it's lack of policy, all identity. And that's what he is. I mean, he's just a gay man with no ideas.
Okay.
I hate when a lot of conservative folks, well, not even just conservative folks, it's usually just white men across the aisle talk about identity politics.
I knew that was coming.
Because it's all identity politics, right? Like, you all have been moving through the world with your lens as a white man, privileged in many different ways. And that informs your politics. I do have privilege. I have never said that I'm not privileged. I think we all have the capacity to oppress and be an oppressor.
He's so mad.
I don't have white privilege, right? So that's exactly what we're talking about, right? I also don't have cis privilege, and I don't have your privilege as a man moving through the world. So, like, that matters.
You don't know my life. You don't know my experiences. You're making an assumption about my life and my experiences
I am not
based off of my skin color,
right?
How could you just do that? Make assumptions about my experiences based on statistically verifiable averages across demographic lines? How could you just do that? You don't know that because I'm a man, I benefit from a series of social systems which benefit all men? You don't know that. Just because I'm white, you don't know that. What if only you think I'm white? What if everyone else thinks I'm black? I have no idea. That this triggered this dumb shit fucking perpetually, Christ almighty, the victimhood complex in these people. Can you imagine how simultaneously ignorant and like fucking easily offended you have to be to get offended by the concept of benefit, of somebody assuming you benefit from the existence of a social system that, statistically speaking, benefits everybody of your demographic status. And he already said, you have privilege too. He even said it to her, you've got black privilege. So not only is he lying because he's like, you can't know me, but hey, you have black privilege. But B, the ease with which he gets offended by this is so incredibly fucking telling. It is hysterical to me that reactionaries have made it a part of their broader policy to accuse the left of being easily offended. I cannot imagine a more sublime example of projection in all of human history.
My sexual orientation.
I know.
And aren't we not supposed to be doing that?
Okay.
I know.
Aren't we not supposed to be doing that?
Right? So, white supremacy is real in our country.
Are we supposed to judge by the content of a character, not by the color of our skin?
Privilege is real in our country.
So I would love your.
No, I'm not a victim. That's the point.
Anyway. I would love to stick to the Mayor P question. Donnie?
I think having him out there and being visible is fantastic for the community. I have a nephew, a 12-year-old nephew, who is a little gay boy. And for him to be able to see that there is a gay man who is running for president is fantastic.
So that's meaningful to you?
It's meaningful to have him there, absolutely.
Okay.
I'd rather have
I agree with that. It's probably a general good to have like minority groups represented in the political system. I just don't think they should be voted for based on their identity alone. I think that's a pretty uncontroversial position, right? Like, it's good to have more diversity in like movies, for example, but you shouldn't go give like the fucking Academy Award to an actor just because they're like Samoan, you know?
a beer with him than vote for him, because he seems like you want to lean in and talk to him some more, you know, and his fabulous theater-loving husband. They sound great, but I don't necessarily think that he's ready to run the country.
All right. So one thing that Jamie brought up was the terms non-binary and GNC, gender non-conforming. How does everybody here feel about the terms GNC, gender non-conforming, and non-binary, and the fact that often falls under the umbrella of LGBTQ? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Sure. So I identify as non-binary and trans at the same time. I believe non-binary is under the trans umbrella. Non-binary for me means that I don't identify as a man or a woman. I'm neither, I am both, I am beyond. And that has nothing to do with my body. My body does not inform my gender.
I completely reject how non-binary people specifically have injected themselves into the
injected themselves. I love that. Non-binary people have been a part of like the trans umbrella, the LGBT umbrella, for a really fucking long time. It's always they force their way in if you don't want them there.
Trans label, because at the end of the day, I'm sure you're an amazing person. You and I have wildly different experiences. I am a transsexual. There's a medical basis for that. There's a scientific basis for that. And for non-binary, it's really not the case. I think that non-binary is more of a political term than anything else.
It's all political. What the fuck does that mean? Non-binary is a political term, but transsexual isn't? What? Oh yeah, I forgot. When we went out to the fucking the Appalachian Mountains and the avalanche of our climate, the snow fell, and in the debris afterwards we found it. We found gender. So gender is a physical, concrete, empirical thing that is non-political and exists in the world with or without humans. And non-binary is political. The non-binary people are by definition trans, because trans just means to identify as a gender other than that which you were assigned at birth. So if you identify as non-binary and you were assigned male at birth and called a little boy, you are by definition trans. So that's easy. That's just a definitional argument. Just slotted right in there, okay? Easy peasy. Now, I do think there is, to some extent, a difference, some sort of categorical difference between transgender and transsexual. The term transsexual has kind of fallen to the wayside, which I think is unfortunate because I think it's actually a necessary term. Because a non-binary person might be transgender, but somebody like Blair White might actually be transsexual, in the sense that Blair White's contention with her body wasn't just the gender with which she was assigned at birth. It was this. She doesn't want to change her gender alone. She wanted to change her sex. So I validate the difference between transgender and transsexual, and I use both terms when I don't think it's going to get people mad at me. Is it still legit for non-binary people to not identify as trans, though, or are they wrong at that? They're wrong at that. The factually non-binary fits under the purview of trans. I don't buy into this like, oh, you can just identify with, oh, I don't identify as LGBT, I'm just gay. Oh, I don't identify as trans, I'm just non-binary. I don't care. Words have definitions. This is the exact same like ephemeral meaninglessness of language that right-leaning people use to accuse left-leaning people of mixing up the terms man and woman. Like, oh, you just think a man can identify as a woman? Sure, well then words mean anything. Well, no. Gender is a matter of self-identification. If a man believes he's a woman, she's a woman. By definition, you don't LARP one or the other. You are what you are. Whereas terms like trans and non-binary, these terms have actual concrete definitions that are meant to empirically describe the demographic status of another. So I do need is agender trans? Yes. I mean, yeah, by definition, right? Trans just means not cisgender, and an agender person is not cisgender. Therefore, an agender person is transgender. It's the only... No one is assigned gender at birth? No one is assigned a gender at birth. Well, maybe one day. Whatever the case is, gender fluid would also fit under trans. Anything that isn't cis is trans. But I don't buy this like, oh, well, I'm non-binary, but I don't identify. Like, I don't care. It's stupid. I fucking hate gender. I can't wait for people to stop caring about gender. Everyone. Not just the transes, the cisses too. The cisses care about gender quite a bit. Oh, hold on. I study this, not sure that separating transgender and transsexual are useful. There are different experiences of dysphoria, etc. Gender expression perhaps better understood positions on the spectrum, not sure if different terms necessarily useful. Also, keep in mind the medicalizing history of the terms transsexual. Yeah, but they're valid differences. Transgender means identifying as a gender other than that which you were assigned at birth, but you can be transgender and not have dysphoria, aka you're comfortable with the body you have, right? Or you don't feel a sense of intense discomfort at your physiology in regards to like its sexual orientation. And you can be transsexual where you actually want to physically mold your body into the characteristics like identifiable as the sex with which you were not born. Whatever the case may be, though, that's how I do it. I don't fucking care. Can we do a fucking video?
Which is why I've never met a non-binary Republican, non-binary libertarian. It's clearly
yeah, and 50 years ago, you wouldn't have met many gay Republicans either. The exclusion of certain demographics from a from like a political identity is not an indication that those demographics don't exist. It just means your political orientation is antithetical to the recognition of their existence. What a stupid fucking argument. Yeah, I mean, I never met like a trans Republican back 30 years ago. It was crazy. I mean, well, it's political, you know? And it's all political. Being trans is political. Being cis is political because it refers to gender, and gender is political. So,
convention of the left in general. I also hate how non-binary people often, because they tend to be the loudest politically,
what? Okay.
They take over trans conversations. I often see non-binary people in the media and on YouTube and on social media deciding what is right for trans people and transsexuals. And I hate it because oftentimes it's not in alignment with most trans people I've actually met in my life.
I have never in my life seen non-binary people step up and speak over trans issues. I have never in my life seen this happen. So what I'm guessing happened here is Blair White saw one or two non-binary people talking about their preferences and their experiences, and then made a YouTube video where she talked about how non-binaries are injecting themselves into the trans movement, and has since then had to keep up this like facade of giving a shit. Because what a fucking Jesus Christ, what a fucking fantasy.
So do you feel erased because of the term non-binary?
No one can erase me. Like I'm here, you know what I mean? But I mean, in terms of them taking over the conversation, oftentimes, yes. I think of a lot of the reasons why conservatives and people who are not in the LGBT community have a hard time understanding trans people, it often goes down to these talking points that were invented by non-binary people and people who are not trans, who their lived experience could not be any more different than mine.
So for one, everything she's saying right now is bullshit. For two, hey, White Nervosa, yes, they did just give her a Republican card. Everything she's saying right now is bullshit. Non-binary people have, like, no representation in media. So that's one. For two, I know what she's on now. What she's saying is that she doesn't like how non-binary people talk about gender being like fluid, or gender being a social construct, or gender being a continuum or a spectrum. She doesn't like that. So she's pretending that aspect of gender theory was invented by non-binary people and is being pushed to like hurt trans people or something. Is Blair White a white nationalist? I don't believe so, no. But yeah, that I think is what's going on here. So gender is an arbitrary social construct that varies from age to civilization, and to even subculture within any given civilization. I assume that she has an issue with, and I know this because I'm familiar with her content, the existence of non-binary people reminding others of that fact. Because she wants to believe that sex and gender are the same thing, and that she has... and that because she has transitioned so passingly, so in her eyes authentically, that she has bridged the gap and now she is authentically a woman, but sex is still gender. She just made the jump with both of them.
And so if it comes down to conversations about trans people, I just wish actual transsexuals were having them, and oftentimes it's activists who are non-binary.
I've never seen this demonstrated in my life.
I don't understand your argument that there's too much division, that we don't have shared life experiences, because among trans people, among binary trans people who may go through medical transition, there is so much variance. You are not a trans woman of color. You are not a poor trans woman. You have different experiences as a trans person that we need to talk about. We cannot parse out at the exact same time to have this conversation.
Yeah, everything's nuanced, but at the end of the day, there's a very fine line between someone who's a transsexual and grows up with gender dysphoria, grows up saving up that money to get the confirmation surgeries they need, going through coming out.
See, listen, all of this language it essentially indicates that you're only authentically trans if you are out, if you medically transition, and if you pass, because that's her perspective.
Going through.
Is Blair a trans med? Yeah, Blair is absolutely a trans med. Blair is one of the biggest trans meds out there.
The hardships that specifically transsexuals face. It is such a different life than someone who.
You don't know my life. You don't know my experiences with gender dysphoria.
We don't know each other's life. I'm not saying that, but but a lot of non-binary people do not. You can say you do, and that's fine. I completely believe you, but a lot of them do not. A lot of non-binary people are the people who argue that you don't need gender dysphoria to be trans. And to me, that makes absolutely no sense, because if you don't have that misalignment in your brain and misalignment in your body and within who you are, then trans really means nothing.
So yeah, it's a true scum versus it's a trans med thing. So Blair thinks you have to pass like all the bars to be trans. You have to have the dysphoria, you have to be out, you have to medically transition, you have to... I guess you don't have to have bottom surgery, because I know Blair White hasn't had bottom surgery because she made a video about it. But beyond that, I suppose, you have to cross quite a few thresholds to be authentically trans. But this argument makes absolutely no sense from any perspective. So, A, even if there is an experiential difference between people who experience dysphoria and those who don't, which is true, there is an experiential difference between those two things. That doesn't necessarily mean that one is trans and one isn't. For two, just because all of them are trans doesn't mean that there aren't, as the other person pointed out, legitimate differences within their experiences that need to be discussed. So non-binary people are just another group of people that fit under the trans or gender non-conforming umbrella that have their own experiences. Blair's attempt to like throw them out of the space is identical to every other group of people. Like, this is the exact same shit that gays and lesbians did with trans people after Stonewall. They think like, oh shit, all right, we're finally getting some mainstream attention. Okay, fuck, time to hoist the people who look a little bit worse under camera light, you know? It's the exact same strategy. I am working for my own social betterment and exposure and well-being, and you marginally misalign with the advocacy I want to engage in. So of course, it's a completely irrational argument. Both groups are oppressed. Both groups have at least comparable experiences, and both groups should be able to speak, to their experiences as much as they would like to. And both of them are, by definition, trans. Blair can stick to the term transsexual in reference to herself if she would like.
Well, I'm non-binary, and I've never made that argument. My support of the trans community always comes at me saying that their voices is important, and I'm listening majority of the time. I think the importance of allyship is just to be in the listen mode, and then I use my privilege when necessary if they say that I need to, because I know that I'm non-binary, I know that I'm gender expansive, but I know how I present at the same time. But you also made a point that you said that you don't understand how non-binary people are making decisions on behalf of transgender people.
I fucking love this guy.
I think that number one, you did kind of erase Jamie's when they said that they are non-binary and trans. So let's start there. And I think that also we can say that about the whole Republican Party, where we have majority white cisgender men making decisions on behalf of everyone.
Do you have thoughts on this?
God damn, absolutely. Listen, you don't understand, okay? You're watching this Vice interview, you just see like 10 fucking dipshits, some more dipshitty than others sitting here, okay? For this fucking guy, it's all ones and zeros, baby. It's just code to him. He doesn't even see the numbers. He just sees, blonde, brunette, redhead.
That's what she said.
I don't identify as non-binary. I can't speak to that lived experience, but there are so many non-binary people that I know who identify that way, who fit so much of the gender spectrum, if you will. I know very feminine folks, very masculine folks who are assigned female at birth, so folks who are assigned male at birth. Some people have had hormones but no surgeries, and some have had surgeries and no hormones. And I wouldn't know how else to describe that particular group without using the word non-binary, because that's the word that they use.
Do it, Blair.
To say the word non-binary is potentially a creation of the left to cause division.
Blair just looks sad. Wait, why does Blair look so fucking sad? Everyone else is like, looking around, engaging. Blair's just... She's seething.
I can't necessarily...
It's a political term.
It is.
It's a political term. It was born out of gender studies classes. It wasn't born out of...
They're all political terms.
People saying, well, maybe this word works as well. And that is my point, is that...
Listen to this. It was born out of gender studies classes. Do you think we would know what trans people are without the concept of gender studies? Do you think we would have any fucking idea what you realize that without political analysis, trans people are just an aberration, right? Like they're just a genetic mistake. It's only through theory that we recognize that they aren't an aberration. They're just an example that our presupposed social systems don't work to the benefit of all people. Only theory, only theoretical analysis can lead us to that recognition that they aren't broken. They just fit outside the preconceived, sort of the presuppositional framework of society. The idea like, oh yeah, trans people, we're out here in the streets, yo. But then like some wiggity whack gender studies professors just up and invented some political biz called non-binary. What's up with that? Try to make that phrase approachable for all the Zoomers in the audience.
I think you're the one that said that I was erasing you as trans. I am. Like, you're not trans. Like, there's a medical definition of being a transsexual and being...
But what if those non-binary people do suffer from gender dysphoria?
Jamie, how you doing?
I mean, that doesn't make you trans to just suffer from gender dysphoria. Being trans is having gender dysphoria and acting upon it to live a life as a transsexual. I think that's different.
So Blair's not just a true scum. Not only do you need to have gender dysphoria to be trans, you actually need to medically address it. Until that, you're not trans. She's fucking beyond the pale. I need someone in this audience to point out that it's all political. Jesus fuck.
I'm gonna stop you. Jamie, how are you doing?
Also, trans people, by definition, includes non-binary people. Blair does not want to make the by definition argument here.
I'm okay.
You're okay?
Yeah.
Do you feel like talking? You don't have to. Okay. Brendan.
Understandable upsetness, but I do wish that a bunch of people on the left weren't babies.
Can I say really quick that even the terms transsexual and transgender were made up, right? They were clinical terms in a lot of ways initially. So we can't use that as like a way of like demeaning people in our community. I mean, it's really unfortunate that we have to do that when we know outside of this room, people don't see any of us or treat any of us with respect.
But you know why? I think that a large reason why a lot of people do not understand trans people is because of
Is it because of non-binary people?
Non-binary. And because of all these other identities that we've all talked about are constantly tacked onto the acronym.
Guys, do you remember all the trans people who got all the trans kids and the dads of the trans kids were like, "You're a valid trans daughter of mine," and then they look on TV and they see a person saying, "I'm non-binary." The cup of milk falls to the floor, and then they went to go beat the shit out of their trans daughter. What the fuck? Most people who engage in oppression of trans people don't do... Nope. Literally fucking nobody engages in discrimination against trans people because of non-binary people. What the fuck does that even mean?
That has always worked. Confuses it.
But how is it different when a cis woman tells you that you're not a woman, or for you to then tell Jamie that they're not trans?
Jamie, you have something to say.
Yes, I think
it's identical, by the way. There's literally no difference. A cis woman could be like, I think including you, Blair White, as a woman just kind of ruins the term woman. Like, your thing is political. I was born like this, okay? Like, the literal exact same argument, word for word, except swapping out the nouns, could be used in place.
This argument is absurd, this idea of you're creating more problems, you're creating more division, you're creating more confusion, because that same argument has been used by gays and lesbians against trans people.
Saying it sounds like another argument isn't an argument. It doesn't mean it's invalid. Saying
no, but it's the
like
exact same logic of saying, we're trying to conform,
so.
we're trying to be part of the state, you are making this too complicated. And in working with the state and working with the Trump administration in order to create inclusivity, you are erasing me and you're leaving me behind. I don't believe in a politic that leaves people behind. I say we start from the back, see who is the most marginalized, see what they need, and get their needs first, and then everyone moves forward at the exact same time.
Do you all feel welcomed by the LGBTQ community?
Thank God they didn't give fucking Blair White the last word there.
The LGBT community is very open to people who believe in the monolith that is known as the LGBT community.
Nobody believes in a monolith in the LGBT community. There was so much fucking contention and infighting in the LGBT community. Nobody believes it's a fucking monolith. Except for people outside of the community. Like bigots. Bigots will think like, oh yeah, they're all just degenerates. But that's it. That's the only group of people who does that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't think that they're accepting towards LGBT people with different viewpoints at all.
Okay.
I had a very interesting experience 2 weeks ago at Pride in West Hollywood. My husband and I were at a restaurant. I was wearing my hat. And within a minute or so, 2 women stormed our table and began cussing at me, yelling at me, screaming. And one question like, what do you think about gay marriage? And I said, well, this is my husband, so I'm for it. How about the way he treats Mexicans? And I said, my name is Ramirez, I'm Mexican-American. And it kind of shut them down, but then they continued to yell and scream and try to incite the restaurant against us.
Did this really happen? Does this actually fucking happen? No, seriously, this reads like a fucking green tech. Like, I was just sitting there with my husband, you know, and we were just having some hash browns, and these 2 triggered feminazis ran over and started screaming fucking spittle, foaming at their mouths. Are you Trump? You're Trump. It's Orange Man and he's bad. I bet you hate gay people. Huh, sweetie. Well, actually, I'm sitting across the table from my husband right now. Well, I bet you hate Mexican people. Huh. My name's actually Ramirez. I'm Mexican-American. Like... And then the whole restaurant clapped. I don't know. Maybe it did happen. I don't fucking know. This is stupid. Yeah.
But I think that the intelligent conversations I've had via the MAGA hat have gone much further than the negative vitriol that is incited by others.
So it's also a conversation starter for you.
I think negative vitriol is a perfectly cogent response to seeing a person in one of these fucking hats.
All right, Raquel, do you have thoughts on this?
The LGBT community should not be accepting to conservatives. Like, I don't give a fuck. The LGBT community, any community based around collective marginalization, should probably not include people who want to further the marginalization. I'm totally okay with that. Absolutely. Let the gay conservatives float listlessly in the void with no one to accept them.
I mean, I think that there is merit in the conversation of not everyone feeling welcome. I don't always feel welcome as a Black trans woman in every space. I still think a lot of the spaces that we have that are designated LGBTQ are so dominated by white cis gay men who tend to look a certain way and tend to move through the world in a certain way, right? And so I find my most power in spaces that are specifically for Black and brown trans folks, and I believe in that.
Donnie, how about you?
Navigating through the LGBT community has been very fascinating for me because I used to feel very comfortable in lesbian bars. And then when I started to present more masculine, that kind of went away. And actually one of my most recent experiences at a lesbian bar was being harassed and assaulted at a lesbian bar in New York City. So that was like this crazy shakeup of my whole life.
And I had the wildest time one time at a lesbian bar, you know, I was just out there having fun, then just got assaulted, you know, it was crazy. A little bit of a tone dissonance there between the message and the way that's, okay.
Changing. And then, as I mentioned, I am married to a cisgender woman, and we were at Stonewall, of all places. And there was a table of I'm assuming, I'm making an assumption here, cis gay men there who saw us kiss, and it was like a cute little like, hi baby kiss. And we got the, ew, breeders, what are you doing at Stonewall thing? And it was like, wow, kid, you have no idea. First of all, I could have birthed you and, you know, have been fighting for, you know, liberation, gay liberation, queer liberation for longer than you've been around. But that's the assumption that they make based on what I look like now.
I'm gonna be frank with you guys. Okay, listen. I lived in Beverly Hills for 22 years. I lived right next to West Hollywood. Cisgender white gay men might actually be like almost as bad as your typical like white straight cis dude. The gay does not do much to save them. Let me tell you, those communities are so fucking obnoxious. Jesus Christ. A lot of them are openly sexist. They talk about women incredibly fucking derogatorily. Like, ew, they will never fucking axe wound, which, you know, of course, brings about the transphobia that, well, this guy would have experienced, I imagine. The communities are just so fucking bad about what about us pans? Listen, pans are all valid. All pansexual people are morally good. Fuck me. Oh god, the communities are so obnoxious. The only times I would go to West Hollywood to actually socialize was like clubbing and for the West Hollywood Halloween parade. And I mentioned this on Twitch once, I actually was on the front cover of the Los Angeles Times once because the photographer who took the front cover picture of that year's Halloween parade, I was next to my friend who was dressed up as Thor, and I was on the front. So I guess I was second billing there. But in a crowd of like 10,000 people, that's pretty cool. All right, what were we doing?
I can't believe that you've got 12 gay people here and nobody feels at home in the gay community, the LGBTQIA community.
Because there's no gay community. There are a bunch of smaller, disparate communities that occasionally unify under like the Pride banner. You know? Like, that's it. There's no such thing as the gay community. Marginalized groups always break up into incredibly, like, fragmented spaces because usually there's a bunch of intersectional bigotry they have to deal with, even amongst other marginalized people.
And I think that speaks to, look, each of us has our own individual experiences, right? We're all humans who just want to, like, live in the world and be accepted for who we are. And that was sort of what the community used to be. And I think part of what we're suffering from is the difference between what it meant to be a community of people that was all across the spectrum to being shoehorned into a political movement. You know, the idea that we all have to row in the same direction politically, you know, is I think a problem for us as a community.
Okay. That's not a lib. That's a conservative. Conservatives are still libs. Okay. Most of the individualist arguments that I hear are really fucking stupid. This one is slightly better because it's like, you know, the political unification is just a proxy for what we really want, and what we really want is to live our lives as individuals unencumbered by social expectation. That's like the charitable interpretation of what she's saying. And she's saying like inevitably any group that we push ourselves into as a political like unit is going to in some way like come to contrast with that. Fuck, man. This is probably the most reasonable sounding Trump voter I've ever heard in my entire life. I wish I could get her on. Can somebody find her name? Somebody who's watched the video, find the segment where her name appears.
Are there any questions that you would like to ask each other?
If I could ask a question to Blair to close too.
Oh no.
I'm curious what you think about the gender.
Oh, right. She's not a Trump voter. I'm sorry. She's a conservative. She's principled, so she didn't vote for Trump. She voted for some third-party person. If you can get her name, I would appreciate it.
Binary. As a trans person who has experienced dysphoria, and I also experienced dysphoria, and I think the root of dysphoria and these feelings of transness is because there is a binary, because there is a limiting construct, social construct that tells people they can be one thing or the other. They can be feminine or masculine. And I think as a non-binary person, non-binary people are actually in the front lines of deconstructing that binary and breaking down those systems of limitation and restriction.
But Blair doesn't like that. Blair doesn't like the idea of breaking down those systems because she's made it. She is a passing trans woman. She doesn't want to break down the systems now that she's made the leap across them.
That I think will allow all of us to be freer.
Ooh, she's
so
gonna
I'm just
break.
curious, like, what truly is your problem with me because I'm fighting for you?
I don't have a problem with you personally. I don't know anything about your life personally. I would say, well, you said then about breaking down the binary, but you're kind of just automatically assuming that that is in the best interest of trans people, and then that's what trans people want.
Doesn't matter, bitch. Doesn't matter if trans people don't want it. Breaking down oppressive social constructs continues with or without you, motherfucker. We don't need your signed permission slip. Not to mention it does benefit trans people. It totally does. But even if it didn't.
I personally have never met a transsexual or trans woman who thinks that that is the way to go in terms of getting acceptance from the larger community. Okay, you're the first one. You're the first one.
You're misunderstanding what I say when I say break the binary. I don't say like get rid of femininity, get rid of masculinity, get rid of women, get rid of men. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I'm saying open up the options, let people be and live and exist as their full authentic selves outside of these limits.
I'm not here to limit anyone's options or say that you can't call.
Well, you literally said they're not trans. Is this her? This looks her. Same hair? Yeah, I think this is her. Maybe I could reach out to her.
Call yourself what you want.
Well, I mean, I have earlier that I'm not
let me
trans.
roll it back. I have an issue with trans people that are not trans saying they're trans when they're not. That's what I have an issue with.
By your definition of trans, okay.
Because I don't have an issue with the non-binary label besides me thinking, okay, there's not really a ton of science behind it. That's fine. I don't like how in the beginning you said that non-binary, you consider that to also be trans. And that falls under trans. Because I think
she doesn't like it. It doesn't feel good to her.
I think that, well, hold on. Because I think that again, dilutes the message. It demedicalizes it, which I think is very, very bad for trans people. I think
non-binary people need medical intervention as well. We need healthcare. We need
and
non-binary.
That's fine, but that's fine. And that's why I would say that I would hope that you guys would, if you're going to advocate for that, do it on behalf of yourselves and not try to squeeze into the T label, a label that historically we are still trying to get people to just understand and be halfway okay with.
Again, this is the exact same argument cis women can make to trans women and that gay people made to trans people back after Stonewall. It is the exclusionary language of a marginalized person on the cusp of acceptance, stepping on the heads of the people who helped them get there. Non-binary people have been a part of trans advocacy for as long as trans advocacy has been a thing and before. And non-binary people, by definition, fit under the umbrella of trans. So everything that Blair is arguing for here is essentially, here is the actual interpretive form of Blair's argument. It's a lot harder for me to get the acceptance of my Republican Trump-loving friends when there are also non-binary people saying stuff like gender is a social construct. I just, my grift has been telling them that I'm a woman because I just crossed the boat, really well, and because I'm pretty, and that makes me a girl. But I don't really want to have to hear about all this broader gender theory stuff. So if you could just cut that out and stop turning heads, it would make it a lot easier for me to be treated nice by Dave Rubin.
And it doesn't help when 97 genders are squeezed into the T label, because at the end of the day,
97 genders squeezed under the T level. Yeah.
At the end of the day, being trans is about, for most trans people, it is about, I was born as a boy, born as a girl, and I identify as the other. And what I find oftentimes is this conversation, really good example of how non-binary people really dominate the conversation about being trans, is that
Where is this happening? Please, I need to know. I need to talk to Blair White.
I will get comments sometimes on my Instagram, people accusing me of believing in 97 genders and all those sort of things that.
I was right. It's because Republicans are like, you fuck. She doesn't like being associated with the stuff that Republicans meme about, so she shits on the other marginalized people to distance herself from them. I was completely right.
That are touted by non-binary people, just because I'm trans. That's a good example of how people don't know what trans is then, because trans people are transitioning from one to the other.
I mean, there's.
So, trans does not actually stand for transitioning. It actually stands for trans, the Latin prefix, which means other or across, whereas cis means same. Again, Latin prefix. So, trans, other or across, means to identify as a gender other than what you were assigned at birth. It does not mean that you have to be transitioning to be trans. There are closeted trans people who are not transitioning, but are still trans. The willingness with which Blair White is willing to like bend language to throw people under the bus because it makes her job as like a right-wing grifter a little bit easier is pretty fucking disgusting. Hold on.
This is a conversation about language too, because you're saying most trans people understand transness as M to F, F to M as a binary. If you actually look at research, 50% of trans youth identify as non-binary. That it's a growing community within
because you guys are
trans
forcing it
people.
to be
Nobody is
We are giving people, I believe we are giving people options to express themselves.
Did you hear what Blair White just said there? The non-binary person said 50% of trans kids identify as non-binary, and Blair White was like, that's because you're twisting the definition. I'm sorry, Blair White, I don't know if you're like a linguistic prescriptivist, but words are what they are, and words mean what they mean. I don't know why when in a technical sense you're wrong, because transgender does by definition include non-binary people, and in a social sense you're wrong, because a ton of non-binary people identify as trans and are treated as such. I don't know how, I don't know what, weird ephemeral definition of trans you're pulling from here, but it's not very convincing.
But they were always there.
Stuff like that.
You're not doing anything new.
Non-binary feelings have existed forever.
Agreed.
We now have
There's nothing new about what you're doing. You've just made it political.
I think that
it just made it political. Conservatism relies fundamentally on ignorance. The idea that oh yeah, gay, the straight people say gay is political, and the gay people say that trans is political, and the trans people say non-binary is political. It's all fucking political, you stupid pieces of shit. It is so I can't believe these people make money off of this. It's all political. It's all socially constructed. All of these are social systems that have been constructed to describe human experience. All of them are used politically. All of it is political. Even being cis is political because gender is a social construct. And social constructs are usually built to fulfill some social purpose, and that is in and of itself political. It's all political.
You have a very narrow definition of what trans is, and that could be respected, but that just doesn't work for people. You generalize a lot of trans people. You said for most trans people, and then I look to my left.
Generalizing would say all.
I'm almost finished, and I look to my left, and
she interrupted. Hey, I'm almost finished. Don't worry.
He was like, well, she doesn't agree with you, and also all of my trans sisters and all my trans brothers that I have in my life support me, and they know I support them, and they want me to come along with them on this journey as a non-binary person because they know that in order for any of us to be free, we all have to be free. So that's where my perspective is. So I know your perspective is different.
He's beginning to believe.
Thank you for
that.
You're free. Thank you, darling. Thank you, darling.
All right.
I appreciate that. Don't tell me what I am.
Good.
I know that this conversation has been hard for some people. I know that you're probably going to go home and you're going to think about this. And I want to thank you for being here because it's not everybody who's willing to engage in these kinds of conversations. This is a difficult thing to do. And I have immense respect for each and every one of you for showing up. I really do. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Who dat?
And with that,
thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're going to wrap this.
Who the name of the Matrix NB? I need that shit right now. Also, in conclusion, fuck these videos. I hate them.